Throughout human history, in every culture that has ever existed on this planet, human beings have developed practices, specific, repeatable, tested methods for cultivating something that ordinary life does not naturally provide, something that the ancient traditions unanimously agreed was the most important thing a human being could develop. Not wealth, not status, not pleasure, but a quality of inner development that the traditions described in different ways, but all pointed at the same thing: clarity, freedom, genuine wisdom, the capacity to live with full awareness, rather than in the fog of habit and reactivity. That characterizes most human experience. Tonight, we are going to explore 9 of these practices, not 9 random techniques from random sources, 9 practices that have been independently discovered, refined, tested, and transmitted across multiple traditions, multiple cultures, multiple centuries. Practices that appear again and again in ancient Egypt, in India, in China, in Greece, in the Islamic world, in medieval Europe, in the indigenous traditions of every continent. Because when a practice shows up this consistently across traditions that had no contact with each other, it is worth paying very close attention. Something real is being pointed at, something that works, regardless of the cosmological framework you place around it, regardless of what you believe or do not believe. These practices work, and they are available to you right now. Let us begin. Practice 1, stillness. Every major wisdom tradition begins here, not with belief, not with ritual, not with study, with stillness, the deliberate cultivation of silence and inner quiet. The Vedic tradition calls it dhyana. The Buddhist tradition calls it samatha. The Christian contemplative tradition calls it hesychia. The Taoist tradition calls it wu wei, effortless non-doing. The specific technique varies between traditions, but the underlying principle is the same. Stop, be still, and pay attention to what is actually here. When the ordinary busyness of the mind settles, the practice is simple. Find a quiet place, sit comfortably, and do nothing, not thinking about nothing, not trying to make the mind blank, simply sitting, letting whatever arises, arise, without following it, without suppressing it, without adding commentary, just sitting and noticing. The ancient teachers were unanimous on the value of this practice, because what most people discover when they actually stop, even for 10 minutes, is how rarely they actually stop, how rarely there is genuine quiet, how the mind, left to its own devices, generates an endless stream of content, thoughts, plans, memories, worries, fantasies, an internal monologue that runs almost continuously, from the moment of waking to the moment of sleep, and sometimes through sleep as well. The practice of stillness is the practice of stepping back from this stream, not permanently, not even for very long, just long enough to notice that you are not the stream, that there is something here that can observe the stream without being swept away by it. This is the first and most fundamental of the ancient practices, and without some foundation in it, the others are much harder to access. Start with 10 minutes a day, the same time each day, just sitting, just noticing, just returning again and again to the simple fact of being here. Practice 2, breath awareness. The breath is the bridge. This is how virtually every contemplative tradition in the world has described it. The bridge between the voluntary and the involuntary, between the conscious and the unconscious, between the physical and the subtle, You can breathe without thinking about it. Your body breathes automatically. Even when you are asleep, even when you are distracted, even when you are entirely absorbed in something else. But you can also choose to breathe consciously, to bring deliberate attention to the breath, to shape it, slow it, deepen it. This dual nature of the breath, partly automatic and partly voluntary, makes it uniquely accessible as an object of contemplative practice and as an instrument of direct influence on the state of the nervous system. The Vedic tradition developed an entire science of breath called pranayama. Prana means life force, and ayama means expansion or control. Pranayama is the practice of working with the breath to directly influence the flow of life force energy through the body, the simplest pranayama practice, and one of the most powerful, is simply slowing the breath down, breathing in for a count of 4, holding gently for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 8. The extended exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response. That is the physiological opposite of the stress response. This is not mysticism. This is measurable physiology. Slow, controlled breathing, particularly with an extended exhale, measurably reduces cortisol, lowers blood pressure, slows the heart rate, and shifts brainwave patterns toward the slower frequencies associated with relaxed alertness. The ancient teachers did not have the neuroscience, but they had the direct observation of what happened when the breath was trained. And what they observed is fully consistent with what modern research is now measuring. The breath is the most direct and accessible lever for influencing the state of the nervous system. And the state of the nervous system determines almost everything about the quality of experience. Practice this for 5 minutes each morning. Slow breath in, gentle hold, extended breath out, and notice what changes. Practice 3, body awareness. The body knows things the mind does not. This is a teaching found in shamanic traditions worldwide, in the Taoist understanding of the body as a microcosm of the universe, in the tantric traditions of India, in the somatic traditions of modern psychology, that draw explicitly on ancient wisdom. The body is not just a vehicle for the mind, it is an intelligence in its own right. It registers experience before the mind does. It stores memory in ways the mind cannot access. It knows things through sensation and feeling and gut response that the rational mind often overrides or ignores. The practice of body awareness is the practice of listening, of bringing deliberate attention to what is happening in the body right now. Not the story about the body, not the evaluation of the body, the actual sensation. This can be practiced through a formal body scan, beginning at the top of the head, moving slowly down through the entire body, simply noticing what is present. Tension, ease, warmth, coolness, aliveness, numbness, without judgment, without trying to change anything, just noticing. Or it can be practiced more informally, simply pausing several times throughout the day and asking what is happening in my body right now. Where is the tension? Where is the ease? What is the emotional quality of what I am feeling? Not as a concept, but as a physical sensation. This practice develops what the somatic traditions call embodiment, the capacity to actually inhabit the body, rather than simply living in the head and dragging the body around beneath it. An embodiment, genuine embodied presence. is one of the most reliable indicators of genuine inner development. Practice 4. Contemplation. This is different from meditation. Meditation is about quieting the mind. Contemplation is about directing the mind toward a specific question or truth and holding it there with sustained attention until something opens. The Hermetic tradition called this operation the practice of applying the mind to a principle or a question with full concentration and genuine inquiry. The Christian contemplative tradition called it Lectio Divina, sacred reading, in which a text is not merely read but dwelt in, returned to, sat with, allowed to unfold its layers of meaning over extended time. The Vedic tradition called it Svadhyaya, self-study, the practice of turning the light of inquiry on the nature of experience itself. The koan practice of Zen is a form of contemplation. The question is held, not analysed, but genuinely sat with until something beyond ordinary thinking responds. The practice I want to offer you here is a simple form of contemplative inquiry. Choose a question, not a factual question, an existential one. What am I? What is this awareness that is present right now? What is the nature of the love I feel? What is actually happening when I experience beauty? Hold the question, not to answer it, but to sit with it, to let it work on you, to notice what arises in the silence of genuine not knowing. Because the greatest insights do not come through analysis, they come through sustained and open inquiry. Practice 5. Nature connection. Every indigenous tradition on earth has understood the natural world as a living system of intelligence, not a resource to be exploited, not a backdrop for human activity, but a presence, a teacher, a mirror. The Taoist tradition teaches that the natural world is the clearest expression of the Tao, the fundamental principle of reality, and that spending time in nature with genuine attention and openness is one of the most reliable ways to reconnect with the deeper rhythms of existence that ordinary life obscures. The Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, has been extensively studied by modern researchers. Time spent in natural environments measurably reduces cortisol, lowers blood pressure, enhances immune function, and improves mood, not because of exercise, not because of fresh air alone, but because of the specific quality of the natural environment, the fractal patterns of leaves and branches, the sounds of water and wind and birdsong, the smell of earth and vegetation. All of these activate something in the human nervous system that urban environments simply do not reach. Something ancient, something deep, something that recognizes home. The practice is simple. Spend time in nature, not with your phone, not with your thoughts entirely, but with your senses open, looking, listening, feeling, allowing the intelligence of the natural world to communicate with the intelligence in your body, which has been listening to it for hundreds of thousands of years. Practice 6. Gratitude. Every major wisdom tradition has placed gratitude near the center of the spiritual life, not as a technique for feeling better, as a fundamental orientation toward reality. The Sufi tradition describes gratitude as the highest form of prayer. The Vedic tradition describes it as the natural expression of the awakened heart. The Christian mystical tradition places it at the very center of spiritual practice. And modern research, particularly the work of Robert Emmons at the University of California, has demonstrated that the consistent practice of gratitude produces measurable improvements in well-being, sleep, immune function, and the quality of social relationships. Not because gratitude is a pleasant feeling, but because gratitude is a practice of attention, of deliberately directing the mind toward what is actually present, rather than what is absent, toward what has been received, rather than what has been withheld. The practice is this: each evening before sleep, take 5 minutes and identify 3 things from the day for which you are genuinely grateful, not things you think you should be grateful for. Things that actually move something in you when you bring them to mind. A moment of genuine connection, a beauty that caught you by surprise, a kindness received or given, a capacity you have that you tend to take for granted, and let yourself actually feel the gratitude, not as a thought, as a sensation in the body, the warmth in the chest, the softening of the belly, the slight expansion of something around the heart. This is the practice, and if you do it consistently, something begins to shift, not because you are programming yourself to be positive, but because you are training the attention to notice what is actually present in the flow of ordinary life. Practice 7, service. Every major tradition has understood service as one of the most reliable paths to inner development. Not service as obligation, not service as performance, but genuine service. The deliberate turning of attention and energy toward the well-being of others. The Vedic tradition calls it karma yoga, the path of selfless action. The Buddhist tradition calls it bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. That is awakened through the aspiration to serve all beings. The Sufi tradition places service at the heart of the path. The Christian tradition calls it agape, unconditional love expressed through action. Why does service work as a spiritual practice? Because the self, the constructed separate self, that is the source of so much suffering, cannot maintain its grip. When genuine attention is turned outward, when you are genuinely focused on the well-being of another, the self-referential loop, the endless commentary about what things mean for me, temporarily stops. And in that stopping, something opens. The same opening that happens in deep meditation, but through engagement rather than withdrawal. The practice does not need to be dramatic. It does not require grand gestures or heroic sacrifice. It requires only genuine attention, genuine care, the willingness to notice what another person needs, and to respond to that without calculation. This is the practice, and it is available in every ordinary interaction of every ordinary day. Practice 8, sacred study. The great traditions did not separate the life of the mind from the life of the spirit. They understood that genuine wisdom required both direct experience and the study of those who had travelled the path before. The Hermetic tradition placed study, specifically the study of sacred texts and philosophical writings, at the centre of the initiatic path. The Islamic tradition developed one of the most sophisticated scholarly cultures in human history, out of the understanding that the pursuit of knowledge was itself a form of worship. The Jewish tradition built an entire civilization around the study of sacred texts. The Vedic tradition preserved one of the largest bodies of philosophical literature ever produced by human beings. The practice I am pointing at is not the accumulation of information. It is the kind of reading that changes you, the kind of engagement with ideas that opens something in the mind that introduces a question you had not thought to ask, that reveals a dimension of reality that was previously invisible to you. This kind of reading requires slowness. It requires returning to the same passage multiple times, sitting with what you do not understand, allowing the text to work on you, rather than simply extracting information from it. Read one page slowly, rather than 20 pages quickly, and see what opens. Practice. 9. Silence. We have come full circle. We began with stillness, we end with silence. But these are not the same thing. Stillness is an inequality, the quieting of the mental noise. Silence is an outer practice, the deliberate withdrawal from external stimulation, from the constant stream of input that modern life provides in almost unlimited quantity. Social media, news, entertainment, conversation, all of it valuable in its place, all of it also capable of becoming a substitute for the inner work that genuine development requires. The desert fathers of early Christianity fled the cities of the Roman Empire and went to live in the wilderness of Egypt, not because the world was evil, but because they understood that genuine inner development required periods of genuine outer silence, extended periods in which the ordinary noise was absent and something deeper could be heard. You do not need to go to a desert, but you do need silence, genuine silence, not just quiet, the deliberate absence of external stimulation. Start with 1 hour per week. No phone, no screens, no music, just you and whatever arises. When the input stops, it will probably be uncomfortable at first. The mind will reach for stimulation, will generate its own noise, will find the silence difficult. This is the point, because in the discomfort of genuine silence, you begin to see clearly what you have been using the stimulation to avoid. And what you have been avoiding is often exactly what most needs your attention. These are the 9 practices: stillness, breath, body awareness, contemplation, nature connection, gratitude, service, sacred study, silence. Not 9 separate techniques. 9 facets of a single orientation. The orientation of someone who takes their inner life seriously, who recognizes that the quality of their inner life determines the quality of everything else, and who is willing to do the work that genuine development requires. You do not need to practice all 9 immediately. Choose one, the one that feels most urgent, or most neglected, or most alive with possibility, and give it 30 days of genuine commitment, not perfect practice, consistent practice, and notice what shifts. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because this exploration continues. Until next time, choose your practice, begin, and remember, the ancient teachers who developed these methods were not extraordinary people. They were ordinary people who took the inner life seriously, and what they found is available to you right now in the next 30 days if you are willing to begin. Let me go deeper into each of these practices, because what I have shared so far is the outline, the map, but the territory is richer, and I think it is worth spending more time in each of these practices, so that when you leave this video, you have something genuinely useful, something you can actually begin. Let us return to practice 1, stillness, and go deeper. The challenge with stillness that almost everyone encounters immediately is the mind's resistance to it. The moment you sit down to be still, the mind generates reasons to get up, things to do, problems to solve, messages to send, This resistance is not a failure, it is the practice, because the resistance itself is one of the most important things to observe. What is the mind avoiding? When it reaches for activity, what is present? That it does not want to feel. This is one of the deepest gifts of the stillness practice. Not the peace that comes when the mind settles, but the clarity that comes from seeing what the mind is running from. The Sufi tradition has a teaching that the seeker must be willing to sit with discomfort, not to create it artificially, but to stop running from what is already present. And in that stopping, to discover that what was feared was not as solid as it seemed. The anxiety that seemed unbearable, when fully faced, often reveals itself as a much smaller thing. A sensation in the body, a thought pattern, something that can be held with awareness rather than fought with resistance. This is what the stillness practice reveals, and this revelation is worth every uncomfortable moment of sitting. Let me go deeper into practice 2. Breath. The Vedic tradition identified specific breathing practices for specific purposes. For calming the nervous system, the practice of nadi shodhana, alternate nostril breathing, is one of the most powerful. You breathe in through the left nostril, closing the right with the thumb, then close both nostrils briefly. Then breathe out through the right nostril, closing the left with the ring finger. Then in through the right. Close both, out through the left. This is one complete cycle. The practice is said to balance the two hemispheres of the brain and the two main energy channels of the subtle body. Modern research on alternate nostril breathing has confirmed significant effects on heart rate variability and autonomic nervous system balance. The ancient teachers did not have this language, but they had the direct observation of what happened to practitioners who committed to this practice. And what happened was transformation, real, measurable, lived transformation in the quality of attention, in the capacity to remain calm under pressure, in the depth of the meditative states available to those who had trained the breath. Let me go deeper into practice 4, contemplation. The Hermetic tradition distinguished between two modes of mind: the ordinary discursive mind, that moves from thought to thought, building chains of reasoning and association, and what they called the nous, the higher intelligence that perceives directly, intuitively, without the sequential movement of ordinary thought. The practice of contemplation was understood as the training of access to the nous, the cultivation of the capacity for direct perception, not the replacement of reasoning with intuition, but the development of a mode of knowing that ordinary education never develops. That goes beyond what reasoning alone can reach. The great discoveries of science have often come not through sequential reasoning, but through sudden insight. Einstein described his discovery of relativity as coming through a kind of thought experiment, a direct imaginative vision, rather than through mathematical derivation. Ramanujan, the extraordinary Indian mathematician, described his most profound mathematical insights as arriving fully formed through what he understood as direct contact with the divine. The capacity for this kind of knowing is not reserved for geniuses. It is a natural human capacity that has been systematically undeveloped in most modern education, and the contemplative practices are precisely the practices that develop it. Let me go deeper into practice 7, service. The Buddhist tradition has a teaching that I think is one of the most practically useful in all of spiritual literature, the teaching of Tonglen. Tonglen means giving and taking, and the practice is this: when you encounter suffering in yourself or in another, instead of turning away from it, you breathe it in. You imagine taking the suffering into yourself and transforming it, and breathing out relief, ease, well-being. This sounds counterintuitive. Why would you want to breathe in suffering? But the practice is based on a profound insight. The suffering that we see in others is the same suffering that lives in us. When we turn away from it in others, we are also turning away from it in ourselves. And when we are willing to open to it, to actually breathe it in rather than turning away, something happens. The contraction that keeps us separate from others begins to open. The compassion that was always there, but was blocked by the reflex of self-protection, begins to flow. And in that flowing, both the giver and the receiver are touched by something healing. This practice does not require you to actually take on anyone's suffering. It is a practice of the imagination and the heart. But the imagination and the heart are not as separate from reality as the rational mind would like to believe. What we practice in the imagination, we develop in actuality, and the development of genuine compassion, of the willingness to actually feel the suffering of others, rather than managing it from a safe distance, is one of the most powerful and most reliable of all the ancient paths to awakening. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because the ancient wisdom continues to unfold, video by video, practice by practice, recognition by recognition. Until next time, choose one practice, commit to 30 days, and discover for yourself what the ancient teachers discovered thousands of years before you, that the inner life, when taken seriously, reveals everything. I want to say something important before we truly close tonight, something about the relationship between these practices and the rest of your life, because there is a temptation that every serious practitioner encounters at some point. The temptation to divide life into two categories: spiritual life and ordinary life, practice time and everything else, the sacred and the mundane, and to experience the ordinary life as an interruption to the real work, as something to be gotten through so that you can return to the cushion, the nature walk, the silence. The ancient traditions understood this temptation, and they were unanimous in their response to it. The division is false. There is no ordinary life. Every moment is the practice. Every interaction is the opportunity. Every difficulty is the teacher. Every ordinary Tuesday morning, with its small frustrations and its unremarkable activities, is as sacred as any retreat, because the awareness that you are cultivating does not belong only to special moments. It belongs to all moments, or it belongs to none. The Zen master who washes the bowl with the same complete attention he brings to meditation is not neglecting his practice. He is practicing the mother who meets her child's tantrum with patience and genuine presence rather than reactivity and self-protection, is practicing the person who pauses before responding in anger and chooses a different response, is practicing. This is what the ancient practices are for. Not to create islands of spirituality in a sea of ordinary life, but to transform the quality of the ordinary life itself, to bring the awareness, the presence, the compassion that the formal practices develop into every corner of every day, This is the integration. This is the full flowering of the ancient path, when the practice and the life are no longer separate, when every moment is lived from the ground of awareness that the practices have helped you find. This does not happen overnight. It is the work of years, of consistent practice, of returning again and again to the simple disciplines that keep the attention clear. But it begins with one practice, one commitment, one 30-day experiment to see for yourself what the ancient teachers discovered, that the inner life, when genuinely cultivated, transforms everything it touches. Subscribe to Sacred Flame, because this work continues. Until next time, begin, just begin, and trust the process that millions of human beings over thousands of years have found to be real.